It needs to be remembered that there are costs inherent in infrastructure, and asset management plans need to be reflected in Council's long-term financial plans. Both of these documents are integral to and heavily influenced by the strategic plans of councils. To ensure sound management practices, financial activities also need to be underpinned by appropriate plans and strategies, and some of these form part of a legislative framework. Think, for example, of the 10-year strategic plan, operating budget, capital works budget, annual plans and action plans and budget estimates, the inputs from community consultation and demand projections and service standards, of course, the suite of financial and asset management strategies and policies and plans. All of these influence the current practices of councils and ensure that there isn't a significant financial legacy left to future generations. Council's plans will consider the availability of resources now and into the future, increasing cost pressures, increasing community expectations, population shifts, demographic change such as the demands of an ageing population, and a range of other pressures. All of these become part of the potent mix that lead to long-term sustainability of councils and appropriate management of their assets. So you can see a recurring theme is emerging about integration of different levels of planning. The objective of asset management is to ensure that assets are managed, maintained, rehabilitated and replaced at points in time and in ways that enable achievement of affordable specified service levels while also minimising the whole of asset life costs. So a strategic asset management plan will need to consider service levels, the financial capability of the council. There needs to be reference to and consistency between the financial plan and the asset management plan, and there will inevitably be trade-offs in decision making. Councils need to adopt service levels that are affordable on an ongoing basis, and then to ensure that maintenance and renewal activity on their assets is undertaken on a basis that minimises the long-run whole-of-life annualised costs. So where service levels need to be reduced, councils could, for example, elect to replace block paved footpaths with bitumen ones, or provide roads with lower carriageway widths. They might be some trade-offs. Roads should be repaired as required in order to avoid premature asset failure, but levels of maintenance should be based on the hierarchical classification of roads based on needs and affordability. Another example, high-use unsealed roads should receive more frequent patrol grading than those that are only lightly used. Replacing an old bridge with a culvert or retaining it but imposing load limits are further examples of trade-off choices between cost and service levels. Such options will naturally be more appropriate in some instances than others. Where an entity is unable to financially sustain higher standards of service from assets, it should plan to reduce the range and level of service from those assets to achieve overall affordability. The reality is that even if a council doesn't objectively determine to reduce service levels, it will happen anyway if the asset is not maintained to the current service level standards. The results will simply, in that case, be more haphazard and ultimately more costly, and the service risks and financial shocks are likely to be greater. So, for example, a bridge may fail rather than be repaired at an earlier stage, or a road pavement may need premature reconstruction because a seal wasn't relayed when it was warranted. The asset management plan and long-term financial plan each should be iteratively refined, having regard to the content of each other. Asset management scenarios with different levels of service might need to be developed, and to satisfy financial sustainability criteria for given operating revenue projections, councils may need to work through a variety of options. So a lot of this so far sounds very technical, and while you certainly will have support from your highly capable council staff, you do have responsibilities as a councillor that you need to be aware of. You are custodians of the infrastructure and have to ensure council's legal obligations are met. You represent the community as the asset owners, and through endorsing or driving strategic planning, you ensure that assets and services are maintained for future generations, as well as ensuring equitable distribution of costs across generations. So when thinking about asset management, don't forget that assets exist to support a range and level of services to achieve the outcomes that have been agreed in consultation with the community. Asset management is a subset of strategic planning. Any asset acquisition, any new purchase or new building or new road or new bridge must take into account the life cycle costs and benefits of the assets, and you need to compare those against the outcomes required to be produced by that asset. Don't forget that assets are not always renewed, and more assets does not necessarily provide a solution to increased service demand. Asset performance must be monitored, and action has to be taken to renew or retire assets that are not providing the desired service outcomes. And each asset should be assigned to a person who takes responsibility for achieving the service levels and outcomes that have been agreed. There are a number of barriers to effective asset management. These include when councillors are unaware of their asset management stewardship requirements, or there's a lack of commitment from the general manager or senior management team. It's a problem when asset management is seen only as an engineering exercise rather than a corporate process adopted by the whole council. A lack of clear policy direction or an absence of long-term planning of asset management practices and systems, as well as a lack of common definitions, standards and performance reporting can be problematic. There must be commitment to asset management principles and consideration of resourcing. So conversely, what are the success factors? Leadership of elected members and senior staff, a whole of organisation approach, not a technical single individual approach. Adequate resourcing of the practices and systems of asset management and integration across the council and with other strategic planning activity. So what happens if you don't do asset management well? Well, importantly, it's likely to lead to a significant increase in operational and maintenance costs over time, and an increased requirement to undertake renewal of assets because they've deteriorated significantly. Poor community assets will lead to community dissatisfaction, and this may have a negative impact on council's reputation. Worse still, a failing asset may lead to significant safety risks. And finally, if asset management and long-term financial planning are not done well and not integrated, it will lead to a poor financial sustainability result over the longer term. I hope you have found this broad overview useful. There are a range of other resources available, and this page has some links to some excellent summary videos, the financial and asset management practice summaries produced by LGAT, which are on our extranet, and also the excellent presentation delivered by Rob Little at our LG 101 in November 2018, which provides a practical example of asset management decisions in play using a community barbecue. And lastly, on this slide, you'll find some common asset management terms that might be useful to get your head around.